I spent a week in Toronto and I kept telling people, I was like, I am just scratching the surface on this really fascinating community of Filipinos in the diaspora. They welcomed me with open arms, and yet they were also like, we're gonna teach you some stuff because you're coming into our territory. So, take a seat and let's go for this ride. Mabuhay and welcome back to the channel. My name is Tez Milan. I am a Filipino American creative here in New York City, celebrating Filipino American History Month. It is the month of October, and all month long there are festivities and there is learnings and there is all kinds of goodness as it pertains to being a Filipino American. And what I've decided to do this month is to expand our understanding of what it means to be Filipino American into the northern part of the continent of North America. For the next several episodes this month, I am going to be focusing on our friendly neighbors to the north, the Canadians, specifically in Toronto. I figured that, it's Filipino American History Month. They are still a part of North America, and share with you my experiences and my time in Canada. There is a huge community of Filipinos in Canada, especially in Toronto. So I made my way up north and spent a good fat week exploring the city, exploring different areas of the city where Filipinos live and where Filipinos have established themselves. And I've learned everything that I could from meeting several incredible Filipino-Canadians during that week. And as you can imagine, only being there for 1 week is just scratching the surface of everything that I could possibly learn and know. I mean, I'm on this journey to learn about Filipino Americans in the United States, and I'm barely understanding like what the heck happened, let alone only being in Canada for a week and trying to, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like, how much can I learn in this 1 week? And it's like, during my week in Toronto, I was like back-to-back interviews with some really incredible people. I learned quite a bit about Filipino-Canadian history, the recent history of Filipino-Canadians, and how that history has affected the way that the community comes together or doesn't come together, as well as why they settled in certain areas. But just know, my disclaimer here, that my knowledge, especially as a Filipino American in the United States, is very limited. And so in case I get some things like wrong or I don't go deep enough into some aspects of Filipino-Canadian history, please forgive me. But I'm doing my best here, and this is the whole purpose of the channel, is for me to learn as much as I possibly can and to share that with you. So we're gonna stumble maybe a bit as we discover and uncover Filipino-Canadian-ness. I'm really excited to share this with you because Filipino-Canadians are a whole other level of experience and knowledge of what it means to be Filipino in the diaspora. I think that they are a lot more concentrated in terms of like their community. I think that they're more aware and knowledgeable about their history. I think that they have a pride about their history that's not so, if I may put it this way, like soft. And I don't mean that they're hard, but like they're just, we're Filipino, let's do this. What's up? You here to visit? Okay, let's do this. This is what we are. This is who we are. We know our history. We're going to share it. We're going to put it out there. I haven't experienced that kind of energy anywhere else in the United States, except for, I would have to say, probably Northern California. The reason why I ended up in Toronto, Canada was, again, by total kismet, fate, whatever you want to call it. Last year, when I was interviewing Dr. Michael Salgarolo about the first Filipinos that settled in the United States, him and I were talking at this beautiful park. And as I was putting all of my stuff away, I started to hear this conversation. This young woman, in her very discreet way, just kind of turned to me and said, you know what, you should go check out Filipinos in Toronto. And I was like, Filipinos in Canada, you're right. So here's what I know about Filipino-Canadian history. And I hope to do it justice, but I'm not Canadian, so this is just the things that I learned over the last several weeks that I look forward to sharing with you. The first thing that I learned is that Filipino-Canadians, the recent arrivals to the country, I learned through my journey and through my learnings that Filipinos in the United States came as early as, oh my gosh, 1580, what was the first galleons? I forget. Morro Bay. The first Filipinos landed in Morro Bay on October 17th, 1587. And then there was the Filipinos that settled in St. Malo near New Orleans. The first documented Filipino-Canadians were living on an island called Bowen Island, which is just off the coast of Vancouver. Now, these first Filipino-Canadians was like a small community of Filipinos that were fishing, and they lived on these floating houses, which again is so reminiscent of Filipino homes that I've seen in the Philippines, as well as the homes that were built on stilts over the waters near New Orleans from the Manila men that were living there in the late 1800s. Originally, Filipino-Canadians were thought to have landed in Canada in Winnipeg 50 years later, in the 1930s. But it turns out that this community of Filipinos was there way before that, and they only recently found this out. I think in the, early 2000s, they discovered these documents that showed that Filipino-Canadians had actually been there way before. So after those first documented Filipinos came and settled in the late 1800s, I learned that the wave of Filipinos that came throughout the early 1900s were in various industries that Canada needed labor for. What I was told is that Canada is a country that will bring in immigrants to fulfill a gap in labor that is needed. And so you'll find that a lot of Filipinos came over to fill those jobs. And what motivated them, like many Filipinos all over the world, was better opportunities to sustain themselves, better opportunities to support their families, and then eventually also to bring their families from the Philippines to these new places. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, Filipinos came to Canada as professionals, specifically in the medical industry. So I found out that there were a lot of nurses that ended up in Canada. There's also a group of Filipinos that came through the United States initially as medical professionals and then made their way up to Canada because they heard of new opportunities. So not only were Filipinos coming directly to Canada, they also came by way of the United States. After the wave of Filipinos came in the mid-20th century, there was another wave of Filipinos that came to Canada through what is called the 1992 Live-In Caregiver Program. I did a little bit more research and I learned that caregivers had been coming to the country to help support families that needed nannies to take care of their younger children, as well as people to come in and take care of the aging. That's when most of the more recent immigrant Filipinos came and established very large communities in specific areas of Toronto. What's really distinctive about the Live-In Caregiver program is that it gave a lot of Filipinos the opportunity to come to Canada and to apply for permanent residency, but they had to work a certain number of hours before they could apply for permanent residency. There were several issues that came about with this program. It caused a lot of families in the Philippines to have to separate for several years before they could then be reunited in Canada. So for example, a mother of, let's say, 3 young children would then leave for Canada in order to take advantage of this Live-In Caregiver program with the hopes of establishing herself in Canada and then being able to bring her family over. But after the required number of service hours and years that these immigrants had to put forth in order to be able to apply for these benefits of the program, they had already been separated from their families for probably about 5 years. And so they're spending all of this time apart from their families because they are not allowed to bring in their families until they are accepted as permanent residents of Canada. Despite these issues with the program, Filipino communities have learned to thrive in a city like Toronto. I got to visit what is considered to be the first Little Manila of Toronto. Actually, I was surprised. I thought that all Little Manilas were at least 100 years old. The Little Manila that I got to visit was established in the 1990s. So it's only 20 to 30 years old. You have these communities that are in a way living the same history that I remember learning about Filipino immigrants that landed in the United States in the early 1900s. So it's kind of neat to be able to experience history as it's unfolding as it had 100 years ago, but now it's unfolding in real time in Toronto, just because of the fact that Filipino immigrants are more recently coming into the country and establishing themselves. Something that I loved regarding Filipino-Canadian history is that there's a big difference between the way that the government views immigrants coming to the country. In the United States, we're so proud of being a melting pot, right? It's like all of these different communities, immigrants, they come into the United States and then they're encouraged, or I don't want to say forced, but they're really, highly encouraged to assimilate and to become part of the American dream and to leave behind your country of origin. But in Canada, what's very special and different is that Canadians, they see immigrants and they want them to become part of a mosaic. Immigrant communities are encouraged to maintain and hold on to their culture and to their history. So there's the melting pot in the United States, and then there's the mosaic of Canada. That's why you'll find in a place like Toronto, there's not as much melting away and melting and integrating of the communities into each other. They're more encouraged to hold on to and preserve a sense of their history and a sense of their identity as Filipinos, for example. And so that's why you'll see that Filipinos in Canada have a stronger connection to their history and to their heritage and to an understanding of what it means to be Filipino, which I feel is, in a way, I don't want to say it's lost, because obviously there is a very large group of people, Filipinos, that know their history here in the United States, but it's encouraged to just kind of like let it go to the wayside, which is in a way what my family experienced when they first came here in the 1960s and 70s, is that they were like told, well, you're Americans now, so you need to just become American, and don't teach your children Tagalog because you don't want them to be separated from America. You want them to be integrated into America. And while Canadians also want to integrate these communities into the fabric of what it means to be Canadian, they also encourage you through programming and through funding to preserve and to uplift and to hold on to an understanding of your original heritage and your community. So that's just a brief history and my very limited understanding of Filipino-Canadian history and how Filipinos came to Canada. They're so similar, but yet so different in how they approach understanding or not understanding what it means to be Filipino. But I just got really lucky because of the people that I was connected with to understand and see that Filipinos in Canada really do have a very strong sense of their identity and what it means to be Filipino and how proud they are of that. And it's something really that I admire and that I look up to and that I feel very fortunate to be witness of. It's interesting because I got the sense that Filipino-Canadians feel that US Filipinos are in a way ahead of where they are because Canadians, they are more recent to the country, whereas the Filipinos in the United States have been around and have a longer history with the US, especially as it pertains to, the Filipino American War and World War II. But in a way, I feel like Canadian Filipinos have a richer, stronger connection to Filipino identity just because of the fact that they are more recent to the country. It's like, two sides of the coin. Which way do you see it? Like there's no side that's better or worse. It's all part of the same coin, so to speak, or it's just all part of being Filipino in the diaspora and what it means to have been separated from the motherland and the reasons why we were separated and the ways that we were separated are similar yet different. We do share a common history, but I do sense that, Canadian Filipinos are different. It's really amazing to witness that and to experience it and to learn from it because it's just a different perspective and it's a different approach that I really appreciate because it's stronger. It's like more guttural. It's more like, this is it. Let's just be Filipino. And that's like really freaking cool. I'm really grateful that I got to see this difference and I got to experience and learn from it. This is how I look forward to sharing Filipino American History Month with you. And I'm so grateful that you are sharing in this journey with me to learn more, not only about Filipino American history as it pertains to the United States, but also as it pertains to all of North America. And I look forward to sharing more of it with you. So that's it for this episode. Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to sharing with you my adventures in Toronto, Canada. And of course, as always, I offer the invitation that if you have more knowledge about Filipino-Canadian history, about history of Filipinos in Toronto, please leave it in the comment section down below. Let me know. I would love to learn so much more about this beautiful aspect of our diaspora. So let's do this. Let's go to Toronto, Canada, and I will see you next week. Paalam. Goodbye. Let me see if I got everything. I think I got everything. I don't know if there's anything else. I think that's it.